Welcome to a fireside reading of Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Chapter 109. Ahab and Starbuck in the cabin. According to usage, they were pumping the ship next morning, and lo, no inconsiderable oil came up with the water. The casks below must have sprung a bad leak. Much concern was shown, and Starbuck went down into the cabin to report this unfavorable affair. Footnote: in sperm whalemen with any considerable quantity of oil on board, it is a regular, semi-weekly duty to conduct a hose into the hold and drench the casks with seawater, which afterwards, at varying intervals, is removed by the ship's pumps. Hereby, the casks are sought to be kept damply tight, while by the changed character of the withdrawn water, the mariners readily detect any serious leakage in the precious cargo. Now, from the south and west, the Pequod was drawing nigh to Formosa and the Bashy Isles, between which lies one of the tropical outlets from the China waters into the Pacific. And so Starbuck found Ahab with a general chart of the Oriental archipelagos spread before him, and another separate one representing the long eastern coasts of the Japanese islands, Nippon, Matsumae, and Shikoku. With his snow-white new ivory leg braced against the screwed leg of his table, and with a long pruning hook of a jackknife in his hand, the wondrous old man, with his back to the gangway door, was wrinkling his brow and tracing his old courses again. "Who's there?" hearing the footstep at the door, but not turning round to it. "On deck, be gone." "Captain Ahab mistakes. It is I. The oil in the hold is leaking, sir. We must up Burton's and break out." "Up Burton's and break out? Now that we are nearing Japan, heave to here for a week to tinker a parcel of old hoops?" "Either do that, sir, or waste in one day more oil than we may make good in a year. What we come 20,000 miles to get is worth saving, sir." "So it is. So it is. If we get it." "I was speaking of the oil in the hold, sir." "And I was not speaking or thinking of that at all. Begone! Let it leak. I'm all a leak myself. Aye, leaks in leaks. Not only full leaky of leaky casks, but those leaky casks are in a leaky ship. And that's a far worse plight than the Pequod's, man. Yet I don't stop to plug my leak, for who can find it in the deep-loaded hull, or how hope to plug it, even if found in this life's howling gale? Starbuck, I'll not have the Burtons hoisted." "What will the owners say, sir?" "Let the owners stand on Nantucket Beach and out-yell the typhoons. What cares Ahab? Owners? Owners? Thou art always prating to me, Starbuck, about those miserly owners, as if the owners were my conscience. But look ye, the only real owner of anything is its commander. And hark ye, my conscience is in this ship's keel. On deck!" "Captain Ahab," said the reddening mate, moving further into the cabin with a daring so strangely respectful and cautious that it almost seemed not only every way seeking to avoid the slightest outward manifestation of itself, but within also seemed more than half distrustful of itself. A better man than I might well pass over in thee what he would quickly enough resent in a younger man. Aye, and in a happier, Captain Ahab.
Devils! Dost thou then so much as dare to critically think of me on deck?
Nay, sir, not yet. I do entreat, and I do dare, sir, to be forbearing. Shall we not understand each other better than hitherto, Captain Ahab? Ahab seized a loaded musket from the rack, forming part of most South Seaman's cabin furniture, and pointing it towards Starbuck, exclaimed,
"There is one God that is Lord over the earth, and one captain that is Lord over the Pequod. On deck!"
For an instant, in the flashing eyes of the mate and his fiery cheeks, you would have almost thought that he had really received the blaze of the leveling tube. But mastering his emotion, he half calmly rose, and he quitted the cabin, paused for an instant, and said, "Thou hast outraged, not insulted me, sir. But for that I ask thee not to beware of Starbuck. Thou wouldst but laugh, but let Ahab beware of Ahab. Beware of thyself, old man."
He waxes brave, but nevertheless obeys. Most careful bravery, that, murmured Ahab as Starbuck disappeared. What's that he said? Ahab, beware of Ahab. There's something there.
Then, unconsciously using the musket for a staff, with an iron brow, he paced to and fro in the little cabin. But presently the thick plaits of his forehead relaxed, and returned the gun to the rack. He went on deck. "Thou art too good a fellow, Starbuck," he said lowly to the mate. Then, raising his voice to the crew, "Furl the topgallant sails and close reef the topsails, fore and aft. Back the mainyard, up Burton, and break out in the main hold." It were perhaps vain to surmise exactly why it was that, as respecting Starbuck, Ahab thus acted. It may have been a flash of honesty in him, or mere prudential policy, which, under the circumstance, imperiously forbade the slightest symptom of open disaffection, however transient, in the important chief officer of the ship. However it was, his orders were executed, and the Burtons were hoisted. Chapter 10. Queequeg in his Coffin. Upon searching, it was found that the casks last struck into the hold were perfectly sound, and that the leak must be further off. So, it being calm weather, they broke out deeper and deeper, disturbing the slumbers of the huge ground tier butts. and from that black midnight, sending those gigantic moles into the daylight above. So deep did they go, and so ancient and corroded and weedy the aspect of the lowermost puncheons, that you almost looked next for some moldy cornerstone cask containing coins of Captain Noah, with copies of the posted placards vainly warning the infatuated old world from the flood. Tears after tears, too, of water and bread and beef and shooks of staves and iron bundles of hoops were hoisted out, till at last the piled decks were hard to get about, and the hollow hull echoed underfoot, as if you were treading over empty catacombs, and reeled and rolled in the sea, like an air-freighted demijohn. Top-heavy was the ship as a dinnerless student with all Aristotle in his head. Well was it that the typhoons did not visit them then. Now, at this time, it was that my poor pagan companion and fast-bosom friend, Queequeg, was seized with a fever which brought him nigh to his endless end. Be it said that in this vocation of whaling, sinecures are unknown. Dignity and danger go hand in hand till you get to be captain. The higher you rise, the harder you toil. So with poor Queequeg, who, as harpooner, must not only face all the rage of the living whale, but, as we've elsewhere seen, mount his dead back in a rolling sea and finally descend into the gloom of the hold, and bitterly sweating all day in that subterraneous confinement, resolutely manhandle the clumsiest casks and see to their stowage. To be short, among whalemen, the harpooneers are the holders, so called. Poor Queequeg. When the ship was about half disemboweled, you should have stooped over the hatchway and peered down upon him there, where, stripped to his woolen drawers, the tattooed savage was crawling about amid that dampness and slime, like a green-spotted lizard at the bottom of a well. And a well or an ice-house it somehow proved to him, poor pagan, where, strange to say, for all the heat of his sweatings, he caught a terrible chill which lapsed into a fever, and at last, after some days' suffering, laid him in his hammock close to the very sill of the door of death. How he wasted and wasted away in those few long lingering days, till there seemed but little left of him but his frame and tattooing. But as all else in him thinned, and his cheekbones grew sharper, his eyes, nevertheless, seemed growing fuller and fuller. They became of a strange softness of lustre, and mildly but deeply looked out at you there from his sickness, a wondrous testimony to that immortal health in him which could not die or be weakened. And like circles on the water, which, as they grow fainter, expand, so his eyes seemed rounding and rounding like the rings of eternity. An awe that cannot be named would steal over you as you sat by the side of this waning savage, and saw as strange things in his face as any beheld who were bystanders when Zoroaster died. For whatever is truly wondrous and fearful in man never yet was put into words or books. And the drawing near death, which alike levels all, alike impresses all with a last revelation, which only an author from the dead could adequately tell. So that, let us say it again, no dying Chaldee or Greek had higher and holier thoughts than those whose mysterious shades you saw creeping over the face of poor Queequeg as he quietly lay in his swaying hammock. And the rolling sea seemed gently rocking him to his final rest, and the ocean's invisible flood tide lifted him higher and higher towards his destined heaven. Not a man of the crew gave him up, and as for Queequeg himself, what he thought of his case was forcibly shown by a curious favor he asked. He called one to him in the grey morning watch, when the day was just breaking, and taking his hand, said that while in Nantucket he had chanced to see certain little canoes of dark wood, like the rich war-wood of his native isle, and upon inquiry he had learned that all whalemen who died in Nantucket were laid in those same dark canoes, and that the fancy of being so laid had much pleased him, for it was not unlike the custom of his own race, who, after embalming a dead warrior, stretched him out in his canoe, and so left him to be floated away to the starry archipelagos. For not only do they believe that the stars are isles, but that far beyond all visible horizons, their own mild, uncontinented seas interflow with the blue heavens, and so form the white breakers of the Milky Way. He added that he shuddered at the thought of being buried in his hammock, according to the usual sea custom, tossed aside like something vile to the death-devouring sharks. No, he desired a canoe, like those of Nantucket, all the more congenial to him, being a whaleman, that like a whale boat these Coffin canoes were without a keel, though that involved but uncertain steering and much leeway adown the dim ages. Now when this strange circumstance was made known aft, the carpenter was at once commanded to do Queequeg's bidding, whatever it might include. There was some heathenish, coffin-coloured old lumber aboard, which, upon a long previous voyage, had been cut from the aboriginal groves of the Lackaday Islands, and from these dark planks the coffin was recommended to be made. No sooner was the carpenter apprised of the order than, taking his rule, he forthwith, with all the indifferent promptitude of his character, proceeded into the forecastle and took Queequeg's measure with great accuracy, regularly chalking Queequeg's person as he shifted the rule. "Ah, poor fellow, he'll have to die now," ejaculated the Long Island sailor. Going to his vice bench, the carpenter, for convenience sake and general reference, now transferringly measured on it the exact length the coffin was to be, and then made the transfer permanent by cutting 2 notches at its extremities. This done, he marshalled the planks and his tools, and to work. When the last nail was driven, and the lid duly planed and fitted, he lightly shouldered the coffin and went forward with it, inquiring whether they were ready for it yet in that direction. Overhearing the indignant but half-humorous cries with which the people on deck began to drive the coffin away, Queequeg, to everyone's consternation, commanded that the thing should be instantly brought to him, nor was there any denying him, seeing that of all mortals some dying men are the most tyrannical, and certainly, since they will shortly trouble us so little for evermore, the poor fellows ought to be indulged. Leaning over in the hammock, Queequeg long regarded the coffin with an attentive eye. He then called for his harpoon, had the wooden stock drawn from it, and then had the iron part placed in the coffin, along with one of the paddles of his boat. All by his own request, also, biscuits were then ranged round the sides within. A flask of fresh water was placed at the head, and a small bag of woody earth scraped up in the hold at the foot, and a piece of sailcloth being rolled up for a pillow. Queequeg now entreated to be lifted into his final bed, that he might make trial of its comforts, if it had any. He lay without moving a few minutes, then told one to go to his bag and bring out his little god, Yojo. Then, crossing his arms on his breast, with Yojo between, he called for the coffin lid, hatch he called it, to be placed over him. The head part turned over with a leather hinge, and there lay Queequeg in his coffin, with little but his composed countenance in view. "Ramai, it will do, it is easy," he murmured at last, and signed to be replaced in his hammock. But ere this was done, Pip, who had been slyly hovering nearby all the while, drew nigh to him where he lay, and with soft sobbings took him by the hand, in the other holding his tambourine. "Poor rover, will ye never have done with all this weary roving? Where go ye now? But if the currents carry ye to those sweet Antilles, where the beaches are only beat with water lilies, will ye do one little errand for me? Seek out one Pip, who's now been missing long. I think he's in those far Antilles. If you find him, then comfort him, for he must be very sad. For look, he's left his tambourine behind. I found it. Rig-a-dig-dig-dig. Now, Queequeg, die, and I'll beat you your dying march." "I have heard," murmured Starbuck, gazing down the scuttle, "that in violent fevers men, all ignorance, have talked in ancient tongues, and that when the mystery is probed, it turns out always that in their wholly forgotten childhood those ancient tongues had been really spoken in their hearing by some lofty scholars. So, to my fond faith, poor Pip, in his strange sweetness of his lunacy, brings heavenly vouchers of all our heavenly homes. Where learned he that but there? Hark, he speaks again, but more wildly now. From 2 and 2, let's make a general of him. Ho, where's his harpoon? Lay it across here. Rig-a-dig-dig-dig, huzzah! Oh, for a gamecock now to sit upon his head and crow. Queequeg dies game. Mind ye that. Queequeg dies game. Take ye good heed of that. Queequeg dies game. I say game, game, game. But base little Pip, he died a coward, died all a shiver, out upon Pip. Hark ye, if you find Pip, tell all the Antilles he's run away, a coward, a coward, a coward. Tell them he jumped from a whaleboat. I'd never beat my tambourine over base Pip and hail him general if he were once more dying here. No, no, shame upon all cowards. Shame upon them. Let 'em go drown like Pip. That jumped from a whaleboat. Shame, shame. During all this, Queequeg laid with closed eyes, as if in a dream. Pip was led away, and the sick man was replaced in his hammock. But now that he had apparently made every preparation for death, now that his coffin was proved a good fit, Queequeg suddenly rallied. Soon there seemed no need of the carpenter's box, and thereupon, when some expressed their delighted surprise, he, in substance, said that the cause of his sudden convalescence was this. At a critical moment, he had just recalled a little duty ashore which he was leaving undone, and therefore had changed his mind about dying. He could not die yet, he averred. They asked him then whether to live or die was a matter of his own sovereign will and pleasure. He answered, certainly. In a word, it was Queequeg's conceit that if a man made up his mind to live, mere sickness could not kill him. Nothing but a whale or a gale or some violent, ungovernable, unintelligent destroyer of that sort. Now, there is this noteworthy difference between savage and civilized, that while a sick civilized man may be 6 months convalescing, generally speaking, a sick savage is almost half well again in a day. So, in good time, my Queequeg gained strength, and at length, after sitting on the windlass for a few indolent days, but eating with a vigorous appetite, he suddenly leaped to his feet, threw out his arms and legs, gave himself a good stretching, yawned a little bit, and then, springing into the head of his hoisted boat and poising a harpoon, pronounced himself fit for a fight. With a wild whimsiness, he now used his coffin for a sea chest, and emptying into it his canvas bag of clothes, set them in order there. Many spare hours he spent in carving the lid with all manner of grotesque figures and drawings, and it seemed that hereby he was striving, in his rude way, to copy parts of the twisted tattooings on his body. And this tattooing had been the work of a departed prophet and seer of his island, who by those hieroglyphic marks had written out on his body a complete theory of the heavens and the earth, and a mystic treatise on the art of attaining truth, so that Queequeg in his own proper person was a riddle to unfold, a wondrous work in one volume, but whose mysteries not even himself could read, though his own live heart beat against them. And these mysteries were therefore destined in the end to moulder away with the living parchment whereon they were inscribed, and so be unsolved to the last. And this thought it must have been which suggested to Ahab that wild exclamation of his when one morning, turning away from surveying poor Queequeg, "Oh, devilish tantalization of the gods!" Thanks for joining me. More tomorrow at 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram. And all the chapters that we read together, I put up onto the YouTube channel Fireside Reading. Please check out Moby Dick, Great Expectations, Sherlock Holmes, all the books we've read. They're all there. Take a look, and if you do like, please like and comment and subscribe. Until I see you again, please be very well. Goodbye.